Hi guys, Siddharth here. In my last podcast, I talked about why capitalism is voluntary despite some of the claims by many modern day communists. Now, one thing that I didn't do in the last video was I didn't actually look at any specific example of a communist making an argument and break it down. I just kind of made my own argument and supported that with a little bit of common sense and logic. So in this video, I'm going to do a video response to an actual communist and try to disassemble his retarded, incoherent argument that capitalism is slavery. So here's the video, and this comes from YouTube user Thoughtslime, and at the time of posting this video has 20,000 views. I actually found this video because it has the same name as my last podcast. Thoughtslime considers himself to be an anarchist, but that can't be right, because obviously he's not an anarchist. He is anti-personal liberty, anti-free speech. I have made an effort to try to understand what his political viewpoints are, and this is what I've come up with.
What I want is socialism, but like without a state? Also, it'd be mad decentralized. We call this framework Anarcho-Communism. Hey, real quick, here's the definition of socialism I use, so we can be on the same page. Common ownership of the means of production, which is to say that the stuff needed to make the stuff needed to survive are owned and controlled by everyone that depends on them, rather than privately owned by whatever ding-dong had the money to buy them.
So there it is in plain English, but I'm just going to show a few more clips for context.
Think of our current society like a pyramid scheme. There's a whole lot of people at the bottom and only a few people at the very top making all of the money and having all of the power. That's what anarchists call a vertical power structure. What we prefer is a horizontal power structure, wherein everyone participating has equal power and direct control over their lives and the institutions which shape their lives. We prefer direct democracy or consensus decision making, where everyone gets a direct say in how the community is managed.
Well, first of all, there's a term for direct democracy. It's called democracy. If you are for direct democracy, then you are for democracy. That means you are not for anarchy. Anarchy is not the same as democracy. They are mutually exclusive in that democracy requires a state. After all, who is he suggesting should enforce the rules and laws set forth by the direct democracy? An angry mob?
Fascism is not smart, but fascists can be cunning. You can debunk, dispute, disparage someone without their presence, without them getting a word in edgewise. Is that fair? Well, no. We don't need to be fair to them. It's not more moral to give them a platform than it is to deny them one. We have to do everything in our power to stop that message dead in its tracks before it has a chance to hurt anyone. If there's a debate, it means that their ideas merit further discussion and examination.
Well, this is him advocating the use of a political echo chamber, suggesting that we should deprive people of a platform by which they can debate politics. And what, who's a Nazi? Anyone who voted Republican?
Have you noticed who the president is?
God damn it. I'm not even going to dignify his claim that it's a good idea to not debate people and shut down the discussion with a response. I'm just putting this out here to show that he is against free speech. But credit where credit is due, he did not explicitly say that we should use the state to shut down free speech.
Power in an anarchist society should be decentralized.
So he goes on to praise anarcho-communism, and he opposes anarcho-capitalism on the basis that it is not real anarchism.
They claim to be against the state, but support capitalism, which of course is absurd, because capitalism requires the state to function. ANCAPs are not real anarchists, and don't actually oppose the state like they claim. They just want to privatize its functions, making those functions even less accessible to the majority of people, and thus are supporting the literal opposite of anarchism.
So obviously this is already getting pretty silly because capitalism does not require the state to function as he is claiming. That is a false premise. That demonstrates his lack of understanding of what capitalism actually is. All capitalism is an operating system in which you have private ownership of the means of production and the right to buy, sell, and trade goods, services, and labor for profit. So, I'm not really sure where the state and oppression falls into that. But ironically, in order for him to stop me from behaving capitalistically, he would have to oppress me. He's also basically saying that in order for it to be anarchism, free things need to be available to you. So based on what I've seen, he seems to be more on the communist side. So now at this point you might be wondering why I'm picking on this bonehead. I mean, you gotta feel bad for him on some level. Life hasn't delivered everything that he's been promised, and he obviously has some issues with comprehending some basic political definitions. And the sad reality is that this guy is not an anecdote. This is a pretty good representation of most anarcho-communists. There are millions of people just like this, and I've met many people like this online. And in what I'm about to show you, he is basically parroting what I've heard many other people say.
The market is made up of people making choices to trade things with one another. You can just pack your bags and move away, build a new non-capitalist society. That'd actually work. If nobody on Earth was disabled, infirm, needed medicine, or lived in an area with an inhospitable climate.
So his first point here is that you cannot escape capitalism because there is no way to go into the forest and start your own society. That is not a fair criticism of capitalism because it can be used as a criticism for any political system that you have in place. For example, let's say that we lived in an anarcho-communist society. I can't just go into the forest and start a capitalist society to escape anarcho-communism. I mean, what if I was disabled, infirm, or needed medicine, or lived in an inhospitable climate? So then I can make the claim that anarcho-communism is not voluntary. Right? Like, nothing is voluntary. Everything is slavery. Because no matter what we have, I have to rely on the system.
Also, the capitalist societies that they currently live in, just let them go, and also waive property taxes for this anti-capitalist experiment for some reason. Also, the capitalists wouldn't just take all of your stuff if you started making something profitable or useful to them, even though they'd have the largest militaries in the world at their back, and you literally live in a mud hut.
Okay, this has nothing to do with capitalism at all. You see how he conflates capitalism with statism. Again, this is not just Thoughtslime doing this. I see this type of thing from like every single anarcho-communist, statist, socialist, communist, etc. They'll look at a tyrannical state and then blame it on capitalism. Well, the state can be tyrannical with or without capitalism, but as I have already defined, the core concept of capitalism is not tyranny. In a capitalist society, you are entitled to your own private property and someone is not entitled to come steal it. If someone does come and steal your private property against your will, then that is not capitalism. That is literally the opposite of capitalism. Even the taxes, like, where the hell did you read that capitalism advocates taxation? Now, to be fair, he was offering a rebuttal against someone who put forth a very poorly constructed argument in favor of capitalism. But I mean, even the rebuttal was incoherent. Another criticism I'll point out here is that he's basically going after the weakest argument that he can find of his opponent. I mean, not all capitalists are retarded as Richard Black.
What does it truly mean for something to be voluntary? Look at it this way. If you're mugged, is giving your money to the mugger voluntary? No? Why not? You chose to do it. Well, in order for a choice to be voluntary, you have to be free to not choose it without harm coming to you.
This is a straw man fallacy, plain and simple. Capitalism is not a mugger. It is your ability to pay the mugger. The mugger in this case is your biology, that if you do not provide for yourself, that if you do not work, that you will starve to death and die. That is a real threat on your life, but it has nothing to do with capitalism. Now, the problem that he has with this situation is probably that it is a false dilemma. It presents itself as a choice, but because you do not have many options, there really isn't a choice. But if you want to go off of this analogy, his solution is not to get rid of the mugger. That would require making people immortal. His solution is to take away your ability to pay the mugger. If I am a human being who is vulnerable to starving to death, and I am choosing to take the only option of work in order to pay for the necessities of life and live, but you think that that's capitalist oppression, and so you take away that option from me, then you are leaving me with even fewer options than I had before. That does not put me in a better position, it actually puts me in a much worse position.
My choice to eat or sleep is not voluntary. I have to do those things because I'll die if I don't, and I don't want to die.
That's true, but that has nothing to do with capitalism. Scrapping capitalism does not magically mean that you will not die if you do not sleep or eat. This is the mugger holding you at knife point. The question is, how will you pay the mugger? How will you put food on the table so that you can eat? One option, capitalism, is to work to pay for your food. In anarcho-communism or anarcho-syndicalism, you have the option to steal from others in order to provide for yourself. But at the end of the day, someone still has to work in order to put food on your table.
I could choose to work for someone else, but I couldn't choose not to have a job at all.
I like this because he's being very forthcoming here. He's showing his true intentions, which are to live off of the fruits of others without doing any work or contributing to society in any way. Yeah, that would be nice. I guess that if everyone did this, then we would all starve to death, but at least it would be equal.
It ruins our ability to negotiate for better conditions, more control over our workplace, or better pay. You have to work to live, but the boss doesn't need you specifically for anything.
I addressed this in my previous video. This is again making the false assumption that the labor market is a monospony. The fear of monosponies and monopolies are very common amongst anti-capitalist people, and it's used as a justification for essentially tyranny that prevents people from buying and selling stuff at the market price, right? Because basic economics dictates that the price of labor, along with the price of any other good or service being sold in a free market, will have a price that is determined by the laws of supply and demand. If all employers were exploitive, as Thoughtslime is claiming, then that would create a shortage of labor that would drive up prices. Now, to some extent, this is a forgivable mistake because economics is not a trivial subject, but unfortunately, a lot of people have cognitive dissonance.
Because there are a lot more people like you than there are jobs available.
It is possible that there is a labor surplus, and that is causing employers to have a disproportionate amount of bargaining power. But again, this is not a problem with capitalism. This is a problem with statism. The reason you can't find a job is because you are being priced out of the market by the powers that be. And this is kind of where I agree with the anarchist stance that we need to deregulate in order to allow people to have the right to sell their labor at the price that they are worth. Now, that might sound bad until you realize that it means a lower barrier to entry for entrepreneurs to start businesses and a lower barrier of entry for employees trying to get a foothold in the job market. And ultimately, it's going to result in more competition in the market. It's going to result in lower prices for consumers. And the bottom line that everyone can agree would probably be a good thing is that less money gets siphoned up by the people at the top. So he's really making an argument for capitalism, he just doesn't realize it.
There's an incredible amount of lobbying power dedicated to keeping wages depressed, even as productivity and profits skyrocket.
This is true, but this is not a byproduct of capitalism. It is a byproduct of the state using power to enforce cronyism. The irony of this mentality is that the lobbying power is pushing forward regulation. But do you really think these socialists want to deregulate? No. Let's face the facts, guys. It's not capitalism that's setting those regulations. It's corrupt socialism that's setting those regulations. Because pretty much every form of organized society throughout history has had a problem with this type of government corruption. But you don't resolve that problem by adding more regulations. And I'm just making the assumption here that Thoughtslime is advocating regulating the labor market in order to add what he perceives as additional protections for workers. It sounds great on paper, but then you realize that regulators can be bought and sold. And if he's not advocating for any type of labor regulation, then what the hell is he even saying? Without those regulations, we would end up with unadulterated free market capitalism.
As for starting your own business, well, that's expensive and risky, and the resources that some people use to do it are not equitably distributed. Well-off people can afford to go a few years without their company turning a profit and have better access to loans and startup capital.
These are all very good points, and this is specifically why capitalism works. If you don't have the skill, funding, or risk tolerance to organize the means of production in a capitalist society, then what makes you think you'll be able to organize the means of production in an anarchist society? You can't, and you won't. No one will. And that's one of the major reasons that communism and syndicism don't work, and why they have led to so many deaths in the past.
There aren't enough jobs to go around, which is going to get worse as automation keeps replacing more and more of the workforce. If the only way to survive is by having a job, and there aren't enough jobs, that means that a lot of people don't get to survive.
There are two things here. First of all, he has a backwards understanding of what a job is. Jobs are not the commodity being bought or sold. The commodity being bought and sold is your labor as an employee. When you work for someone, the employer is buying your labor at the market price. So the problem here is not that there are too few jobs. The problem is that there is too much labor. And call me cynical, but that sounds like the opposite of a problem to me. What that means is that all of society's needs are being met, and we have so much excess that there are people who don't even have to work. Now, this is just addressing the points as he put them, but this is a little bit more complicated than that. There very well may be an artificial labor surplus, where people who are able and willing to sell their labor are unable to find a buyer at any price. But if that's the case, That is not because those jobs don't exist. It is because you are not allowed to take them. For example, if you were an individual who is struggling to get his foot in the job market, you could accept a job pumping gas or bagging groceries, cleaning people's houses. There are so many things that you could be doing to survive. The problem is not that those jobs don't exist, it's that you are not allowed to take them because they would pay less than the minimum wage. This is a classic example where an anti-capitalistic mindset has resulted in regulation that is pricing able-bodied individuals out of the labor market. Come on, Thoughtslime, I'm a low-skill laborer looking for a job, but I'm not allowed to take those jobs because you think it's oppressive, so now I have to sit at home and starve to death. Thanks a lot, Thoughtslime. Let me address the robot thing. Automation is expected to automate away a lot of jobs. This is not bad though. This increases the productivity of society. This will allow us to feed more people. Automation will allow new entrepreneurs to enter the market and compete against larger competitors with minimal startup capital. How the hell is that a bad thing? That's going to create more jobs, it's going to create more wealth, it's going to lift more people out of poverty. Even people like Thoughtslime will be able to use automation technologies to improve his own circumstances. Case in point, consider YouTube, the platform that Thoughtslime is on. Prior to YouTube or other similar platforms, in order to have a show where you talk about politics, you'd have to have your own TV program. In other words, you'd have to be a multi-millionaire just to get started. Nowadays, any brainless moron can have a political TV show, and it's absolutely free thanks to automation. Oh no, that killed a lot of jobs. We should go back to where cable television had a monopoly over entertainment. Come on now. Yes, it eliminated jobs, but it created an enormous amount of value for society. And not just value, it created opportunity. And this is the case for virtually all automation.
Do you need insulin? Well, it could be produced and distributed as cheaply as beer, but that's not profitable enough, so you'll just have to pay whatever exorbitant price we decide to charge you.
So again, he's conflating capitalism with statism. This type of price inflation does not happen in a free market. It doesn't happen with any other products. Like it doesn't happen with clothing, it doesn't happen with food. So why does it happen with medicine? Well, it happens because people like Thoughtslime think that medicine is too important to leave to the free market. So people like him have imposed regulations that prevent just anyone from making and selling insulin. Capitalism would allow me to make my own insulin and sell it to people who want it. And free market competition would drive prices down. But if I tried to manufacture insulin and sell it to someone who needed it, I would be thrown in prison. That is not capitalism, that is tyranny. And that is the reason that the price of medicine is so high.
Do you like child labor? I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that no, you don't, because you're not an ooze monster. I'll just choose to not buy things made using exploitative labor, because I'm a good socialist boy. I'm going to vote with my wallet. All I have to do is check on all the companies involved in selling, manufacturing, and distributing all of the products I use, and all of their suppliers, and all of their suppliers.
First of all, what do you have against ooze monsters, you racist? This is a little controversial, and I would like to do a video touching on this in the future. But I'm going to play devil's advocate here and say, who are you to decide on behalf of someone else whether or not they should be working? If someone in an impoverished country is forced to accept a job in order to pay for their own survival, then what option are you leaving that desperate person? Well, you are self-righteously taking away their only means of survival, so you are making the decision that they should die. You are never helping someone by taking away their best option. And tragically, a lot of these boycotts have led to children who rely on capitalism for survival to have to turn to prostitution in order to feed themselves. Thanks, Thoughtslime, you really helped there. You know, like, how dare you make that decision on behalf of someone else? What a sheltered, entitled little brat.
All production is exploitative under capitalism. Oh no! Bosses are extracting surplus value from their employees. What are we going to do?
Remember, you are also selling your labor to the employer for profit, so you are also extracting excess value out of that trade. There is such a thing as a disposable income. Thoughtslime would have you work for no profits. That's stupid. Alright, that's all for now. Until next time, live long and profit.